when we talk poverty in Africa, it's a completely different level of poverty altogether, because when you talk poverty, you're not talking about having your basic amenities that you have here. You know, I mean, the slums are slums. You know, there's no plumbing to talk about. There's raw sewage everywhere. There's overcrowding, and there's basically no food. And so that's the kind of poverty that people wouldn't even dream exists. And even in Zimbabwe, those of us who live in the in the northern suburbs and don't know what's happening in the townships get shocked.
Without security of those people's basic rights, is securing their economic rights, is that just a fragile thing that could be taken away from them, I suppose?
It is a fragile thing, but I mean, when you look at it from the other perspective, is what's the point of ensuring that somebody doesn't go to jail if when they're out of jail they won't even have that 1 meal a day, whereas if they're in jail they might have 1 meal a day. There are those contradictions of, you know, yeah, sure, you got me out of jail, so what? How am I going to live after that? So, you know, depending on the person's circumstances, it actually can be a double-edged sword, where somebody might have been fed in prison and you get them out of prison and they have no food outside prison. And there must be a way of finding some form of balance.
Do you see, when you represent somebody from Women of Zimbabwe Arise, do you see that your representation of them is like your contribution to what they're doing in terms of calling for, you know, basic things like water and education for their children, or do you just sort of see it as representing another client who is? No.
In fact, when you watch the documentary, you see Jenny. I try as much as possible to get the judicial officer to see that these women are asking for things that we all aspire to. They're not just another client, you know. When she says, I bring their demonstration and their issues into the courtroom, I truly try to make the person trying them see that this cannot be a crime at all, and they're just not another client. They are asking for basic things that ought not to be criminalized.
The Millennium Development Goals cover lots of the same issues that that WOZA are kind of are fighting for. Lots of the same provisions that they want to secure. But you were sort of saying yesterday that it's just a piece of paper.
For the government,
for the
yes,
government.
It is.
I mean, do you see any advantage in sort of those international instruments? Do you see that they have a role at all?
You see, there's nothing wrong in aspiring to have those goals and in having some form of sanction if you don't meet them. I mean, if there was something that was done to make sure that, you know, the politicians stick to what has been agreed to. But I mean, most of these guys, even a whole lot of the treaties, this and that, they'll happily sign, but they really don't care about the implementation.
We're currently consulting lawyers on, on what they want this framework to look like, what they want to come after the MDG. World leaders have identified rule of law as one of the things that's a priority. But you know, rule of law is open to interpretation as a concept. So if Zimbabwe next week actually got rid of its Bill of Rights, would you see residual human rights as being a fundamental part of the rule of law without it being written down, without it actually being held on the statute?
Yeah, it really ought not to be written down, because, I mean, the Christian saying that you do unto others like you'd like done to yourself ought to apply across the board. I mean, if our politicians truly cared about their people, we wouldn't need to write down all of these things, because we ought to apply them. It's just part of our humanity, you know. As human beings, we have the capacity capacity to see right from wrong and to do with each other, what is right. And so, yes, my view is that we really do not need the pieces of paper. But the pieces of paper help in trying to hold people to a certain standard.
Lots of our readers and lots of the people who will watch the video are going to be people who work in the City of London as lawyers. And it's this age-old question of, is there anything that they can actually do specifically in terms of using their legal skills to help the struggle for justice in Zimbabwe?
Oof, it's always a bit difficult to really answer and say that, but I mean specifically with this group, I think because we have so many organizations that deal with rule of law issues, that look at the more the socio-political issues, we could have an organization such as yours look at the economic issues. What sort of blueprint can we have to use lawyers in Zimbabwe to empower the people economically? Because as lawyers, we should really use our different capacities and our different skills to empower holistically the entire human person. I mean, you could look at how do we look after prisoners, particularly the female prisoners, for instance. What can we set up in Zimbabwe with our colleagues there that can make sure that the women come out of prison with some skills, or they use that time profitably and to look after themselves, to avoid them going back into jail in the first instance. And for me, that would be a very powerful tool in that we have lawyers not just looking at keeping women out of jail when they've transgressed, but empowering them to be better people when they come out.